your shutdown procedure, they will be lost. Use the Load Save menu to save the entire mixer configuration, including all the EMEM, before you turn off the power. The use of EMEM can really help keep your production moving smoothly, add a lot of extra excitement to your event. It's a valuable tool to have at your fingertips, so keep practicing the EMEM features. Let's move on now to the Media Player section, where we will learn about how Indigo can control a remote device for easy media playback. One of Indigo's most interesting and powerful features is its ability to interact with external media player devices. Here we have set up one such device, the Turbo Digital Disc Recorder, also from Grass Valley. Stored on the Turbo are several video clips. By remotely controlling the Turbo, we can incorporate these clips into our presentation. In order to use the media player function, we need to learn about two different things: how to set up an external media player, and how to interact with it using Indigo. Let's start by setting up the Turbo IDDR. Once it has been connected to power, a monitor, and keyboard, then you can connect it to the Indigo mixer. Let's connect it using the DVI output under Player 1. Connect that to one of the computer video imports in the back of Indigo. Now that we have routed the video out of the Turbo and into Indigo, we need to establish remote control. Let's do that by using a simple crossover Ethernet cable to connect the LAN port from the Turbo to the LAN port in Indigo. Indigo needs to be set up first on the network. For instructions on doing this, see the Setup chapter. Now we need to find out the network address for the Turbo because we will need it later. Since Turbo runs on Windows, we can do that the same way we find an IP address on any Windows system. Under the Control Panel Network Settings, we find that the IP address for the Turbo is 192.168.127.127. Write that down because we'll need it when we set up the remote control in the Indigo menu. Finally, make sure that control of Turbo's P1 channel is set for remote using AMP protocol. For help with this, you can refer to the Turbo Operator Manual. Now we need to go into the Indigo Setup menu and establish remote control over the Turbo. Press the Setup tab on the touchscreen. Now go along the top tabs to External Devices and press that tab. You will see this screen, which allows us to set up remote control of any external media players via RS-422 or LAN connection. Start by pressing Media Player 1 on the left, and then choose the LAN button on the right. This will display several options for external media players. We're using the Turbo, so press the Turbo button. Our video source is coming out of Turbo Player 1, so choose P1. Now we need to enter the network address for Turbo. Press in the black box, and you will see a numeric keypad appear. We will enter the IP address we found earlier for Turbo, which is 192.168.127.127. Now we press Connect. It's simple as that. Indigo can control the Turbo. Now that we have remote control over Turbo, we can call up Turbo clips for use in our production. Press the Media Player tab on the side of the touchscreen. You'll see that you have 8 possible media players to choose from along the top. We set up the Turbo as Media Player 1, so we will choose MP1. The clips that are on the Turbo appear in the scroll list. If you don't see any clips, make sure you're in the right directory. Then try pressing the Refresh Clip List button. You can now look through the Turbo for video and audio clips. Choose the clip you want, and then press Load Clip. Now a link to that clip is stored in Indigo and can be used like any other video source. You also have jog or shuttle control over that clip, just as if you were sitting at the Turbo. You'll notice that you can see thumbnails of each clip before you play it. This is only available when you set up a LAN connection. If you connect the Turbo via an RS-422 connection, you won't be able to see thumbnails like that. You can also choose to add a video clip to your favorites list. By doing this, you can create a group of clips that may be sourced from all 8 media players, but can be played from this submenu. In addition, you can select a clip that will automatically play when the source for the clip is mixed into your program. We'll go over how to set up that feature in a later section. Now that you know how to set up media player control and you can load clips into the Indigo mixer, you've gained a lot of control over inclusion of pre-recorded content in your production. Like a lot of features in Indigo, this is something that will become a much more powerful tool the more you practice with it. Now let's move on to talk about another important and powerful feature of the Indigo mixer: audio. Audio is going to be a big part of any production. The Indigo AV mixer has some powerful and unique features that can really help your presentation or event be memorable. Let's go through a few different aspects of the audio features on Indigo. We'll start with the basic use for audio, which is mixing it. When we talked about the control panel buttons, we spoke briefly about the audio faders, but there's a little more to cover. Let's start by pressing the audio mixer tab along the side of the touchscreen. You will see a series of 3 tabs along the top to choose from: Mixer, Channel Adjust, and Monitor. Let's start with the Mixer tab. These 8 faders represent the 8 stereo inputs available on the back of the unit. By default, each of the first 6 channels are tied to the physical faders on the front of the unit. You will notice that if you move the touchscreen faders, the physical faders will move to follow, and vice versa. In the same vein, you can turn the channels off or engage pre-fade listening on any of these channels, either from the touchscreen or the physical audio panel. You can also pan from left to right on any channel using the touchscreen. Let's choose a channel, Channel 1, and then look at the second tab, Channel Adjust. Using this tab, we can fine-tune a particular audio channel using an equalizer or EQ and gain. To engage the EQ, press the Equalizer On button. You can then either choose from a preset EQ setting, default, rock, pop, or classic, or you can manually adjust the low, medium, and high frequencies. In the bottom row, you can apply a channel gain, as well as assigning the channel to either the main channel, the sub-channel, or both. The sub-channel can create a separate mix. There's also an option for low cut, which will suppress the low frequencies of the signal. Let's look at the last tab, marked Monitor. Here we can adjust the outputs of the system. We have panels here to control the main out, the sub out, adding the sub to the main, and then in the bottom panel we can control the headphone output. You'll notice that in the headphone panel you have the option to listen to the main and sub channels, either pre-fade or after fade. And besides controlling the headphone volume from the knob on the front of the unit, you can control it from this panel. As you can see, you have a lot of control over the audio in your production using the Indigo mixer. In the Setup menu, we will find some more options to better control the audio. Press the Setup tab along the left-hand side. You will see a lot of tabs along the top, most of which we will discuss in a later section. For right now, we want to look at the Audio tab. You'll see that you have 5 buttons along the top of the panel: Input, Output, Operation Mode, Follow Video, and Input Delay. Let's go through each one in order. Press the Input button and then you will see 2 columns appear. On the left are the channels that correspond to the faders in the Audio Mixer tab. The channel configuration will match what you select in the Operation Mode. On the right is a list of all the possible audio inputs: RCA, TRS, also known as quarter-inch, XLR, AES, and you even have the option to de-embed the audio from SDI video. Notice that if you choose a TRS input, you can choose the source level on the right-hand side. Similarly, if you choose an SDI input, you can choose the audio group and pair on the right-hand side. Press the Output button. You will see several options appear in 3 panels: Main Out, Embedded Audio, and Sub Out. Through these panels, you can control all aspects of the audio output. Under the Main Out panel, you can choose whether your audio meter or VU meter is showing the pre-fade or after-fade volume levels. You can also choose the level for the XLR output. Under the Embedded Audio panel, you can choose which of the output channels contain embedded audio. And in the Sub-Out panel, you have several options for the sub-channel. You can choose whether the VU meter for the sub-channel is showing pre-fade or after-fade levels, as well as selecting a source and choosing the output level for the TRS out. To the right of that is the option to add a delay to the subchannel as it goes out. This can be accomplished by using the digipots at the bottom of the screen. Remember that you can restore the default setting by pressing the digipot. Press the Operation Mode button. You will see that you have 3 options available. Remember that the stereo XLR inputs on the back can also be used as mono microphone inputs. These buttons give you the option to activate either 2 or 4 microphone inputs. The next button is Follow Video. This will allow you to tie an audio source to a video source. You can do that by pressing AFV Enable and then choosing a video source and a corresponding audio source. Remember that you are linking the 2 channels, not the content in them. Let's tie SD input 1 to stereo 5 for demonstration purposes. By pressing the level set, you can choose an on-air and off-air volume for the audio source. So for instance, you can choose an inaudible volume level for off-air and a volume level of -10 decibels for on-air. Now when you fade out video 1, stereo 5 will fade from -10 down to nothing. When you fade that video 1 back in, stereo 5 will fade back up to -10 dB. The last tab is for input delay. Using this input delay will allow you to correct for the differences between incoming video and audio signals. You will notice that you can set the delay by fields, milliseconds, or an auto delay. Auto delay makes Indigo match the audio after any differences caused by internal video processing of keys or scaling. As usual, setting the delay is done using the digipots. Now you have all the basic knowledge you need to create a fantastic audio component to your live production. Once again, you can really get the hang of all the ins and outs by practicing with your Indigo system. Let's move on now to the initial setup of the system. This setup will be the place to start to get your production off the ground. We need to take a moment to cover some basic safety precautions and notes. These are simple but important things to remember while you set up and use the Indigo mixer. Indigo is a single, self-contained unit that is designed to sit on the work desk of the operator. There are no separate parts that are mounted elsewhere in a rack. If you wish to keep the Indigo from moving, you can bolt Indigo to the desk using threaded bolt holes in the feet. The bolts are size M5 and shouldn't be more than 10 millimeters in length. Indigo is small enough to fit in a standard rack space as well. You can use the bolt holes to attach the unit to a rack-mounted shelf. As you set up your Indigo mixer, you will likely have a lot of cables and cords attached to the back of the unit, like we do. To protect the connections on the mixer, as well as the cables, try to provide some tension relief to the cables. A simple way to accomplish this is to zip tie the cables together, or to a nearby stationary object like a rack support. The Indigo mixer is not designed to handle extreme heat or cold, so avoid taking Indigo into those types of situations. Additionally, your Indigo AV mixer is outfitted with 2 fans to keep the unit's temperature at the correct level. The fans are located on the bottom of the mixer, here and here. In order to keep the unit working properly, do not cover or block these fans. In fact, sliding something under the unit, even a paper or script, can block the fans and raise the unit's temperature too high. The Indigo mixer is also equipped with on-screen fan and heat warnings that can notify you if your unit is getting too hot. You can check on the status of the fan and the unit's temperature at any time under the Setup menu in the Diagnosis tab. The touchscreen may become smudged over time, but it is easily cleaned. In fact, ours is pretty smudged right now. To clean the touchscreen, you can use standard window cleaner. However, do not spray the cleaner directly onto the screen. Dripping cleaner may damage the unit. Instead, just spray the cleaner onto the cloth or paper towel and use that cloth to wipe the screen clear, just like this. In the same vein, be careful with any liquids around the unit. Spilling any kind of liquid onto the control panel or touchscreen will damage the unit. These are just a few of the basic operating precautions you should be aware of before you start using the Indigo AV mixer. For more detailed information, you can always read the safety cautions in the Indigo manual. Oh, by the way, never open the unit housing. It is too dangerous. And it, of course, voids the warranty on the product. Let's go through the basic setup for the mixer so that you can get started with using your indigo mixer in a production. What you want to do is to adjust the mixer so that it works the easiest for you. It's like adjusting the seat and steering wheel in your car. By putting these elements in the most comfortable position for you, you are optimizing your ability to use the mixer. Most of what we will do in this section is under the Setup tab along the left-hand side. Press the Setup tab and you will see a variety of sub-menus to choose from. We've already looked at the audio setup in the audio section, but let's look at the others in turn. We'll start by pressing the System tab. The Network button allows us to configure our local network. By pressing Edit, we can see some different network options available. The Indigo manual provides additional information. Be sure to set this up correctly. You'll remember that we can check the status of our fans and system temperature under the Diagnosis button. And you can reset the unit to factory defaults by going to the Reset button and choosing Factory Default. Next, let's look at the Video tab. This is where we will set up all the basics for our production as far as video is concerned. Let's move through the sub-menus from left to right. The Input button will show us each video input, and for the inputs that have multiple options, allow us to choose between input types. For example, if we highlight SD Input 2, we can see that we have the choice to select either SDI, Composite, or S-Video as the input type. Sources 9 and 10 can be set up to downscale the high-res inputs. The high-res inputs are at the bottom of the list. When you set up the high-res inputs, one of the options is to scale up SD inputs. This menu allows you to determine how you want to adapt between 16:9 and 4:3 inputs. The next button is Input Command. This will allow you to automatically play a favorite clip from the Media Player section when that input is selected. You can also choose a pre-roll time for the clip. The digipot below delays the transition in Indigo after the media player has started to cover unwanted frames at the beginning of the clip. After that, we have the Operation Mode button. In this section, you can choose between 3 different operation modes. 2 MEs, which is the way we have been learning it, switching between high-res and standard definition flat, and high-res flat. In the SD flat mode, you don't switch between high-res and SD modes to choose inputs. Instead, 1 through 8 become SD inputs, and 9 and 10 are downscaled high-res inputs. Selecting input 9 or 10 also switches the unscaled input in the high-res section. If you choose high-res flat, then 1 and 2 become high-res inputs, and the rest are SD inputs, or high-res mats. Either of these modes will also auto-scale the program output to high-res or SD, depending on which mode you choose. If you're having trouble switching between the 2 MEs, then you may want to look into using the Indigo mixer in either SD flat or high-res flat modes. Next is the SD output button. Here you can choose between a PAL and NTSC signal, as well as changing between 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratio. You can also enable an external gen lock and adjust it as well. Under the high-res output button, you can choose which high resolution you are sending out. Just choose a resolution and press Apply. I'd recommend that you try to match the best resolution of your projector or display. We've already covered the audio setup, so let's move on to the Control Panel tab. Here you will see 4 buttons along the top. Calibration will allow you to calibrate the audio faders, joystick, touchscreen, and lever arm. Also remember that you can calibrate the touchscreen at any point by pressing on all 4 digipots at once. SD Button Assign allows you to reassign which input is selected with each button. Often throughout this demonstration, we've talked about assigning still images to different buttons. This is where we would do that. Simply choose a button in the left-hand column, and then choose the source in the right-hand column, and choose Assign. Now a still image is mapped to button 3. You can do the same thing under HR Button Assign. This will map the buttons in high-res mode. Fader Assign is a similar idea. As you know, you have more channels of audio input than the 6 physical faders. You can map which channels go to which faders in this menu. Just choose a fader, choose an input, and press Assign. The last two tabs, GPIO and External Devices, allow you to edit the details of your general purpose input-output channels and any external devices that are attached to your system. The External Devices menu is where you set up connection to a media player like Turbo IDDR or an editor. This connection is required for the media player submenu to work correctly. You remember we went through that in the media player section. That covers the basics of setting up the Indigo mixer. However, here are a few tips for making your Indigo do as much as possible. First, note the two buttons we haven't talked about yet. They're in the upper left of the panel next to the headphone jack. These two user buttons are shortcuts to return you to a particular menu. Let's say that you need to jump back to the Key or Transform submenu quickly. If you navigate to that submenu and then hold down user button 1 for 2 seconds, it will glow. This means that you have programmed that button to that submenu. So no matter where you are, you can press user button 1 to jump to that menu. In a related area, this lock icon can help you remain on a menu. Usually when you press a physical button, the touch screen jumps to the related submenu. By pressing the lock icon, the Indigo will no longer try to anticipate which submenu you want to change. It will only change menus when you use the touch screen. Another important thing to learn is saving your settings. You can save different settings for different events and recall your EMEM data, transitions, and more. Simply go to the Load Save tab on the right-hand side and choose Save or Load. You can save and load easily to a USB flash drive. If you don't save your settings, EMEM and stills will be erased when you turn off the unit. That should give you enough information to set up and use your Indigo AV mixer. For service questions, you should contact the dealer where you purchased the unit or visit our FAQ site at grassvalley.com. That concludes our tour of the Indigo AV mixer. You now know the basics of the unit, and as you apply the mixer to your productions, I'm sure you will find lots of other ways that Indigo will enhance your presentations and events. It truly is a powerful tool and very easy to use. And now that you know how to use it, you can exponentially increase the quality of your live events and presentations. Instead of needing a crew of technicians,